What's going on YouTube? Nothing much here really. Okay, here's what I did yesterday. Here's one of them filters off of them Delardo clone carburetors. All I did was drill me some holes, and take your stock CDI box bolts and chop them down. So when you bolt it into the carburetor, they're not sticking all the way through it. Now, I included the boost bottle intake, and I know a lot of people's like, boost bottle? That don't work. Well, with the air filter change to this one and the boost bottle, all the leakage I was getting, it was on this back seat pole from factory carburetor. Filter is now gone. All that leakage is gone. It does not leak no more. All that spitting don't spit no more. I did change the jug out. I'm going to have to pull this engine back apart and change the rings. The rings are shot. What happened is I loaned the bike to a buddy of mine this past fall / winter, and when he brought it back to me, it didn't run right at all. I went to ride it, and when I went to ride it, it basically wouldn't run. And yes, if anybody's wondering, this is the ZAE50 rod motor that I've been talking about, that I talked about in the last video of me doing a build of the PK80. That's what all this shit's doing here. Okay. I know a lot of people's talking about how long does one of these engines last? How far can you push one? Literally, how far can you push one before it gives out? Well, the old PK80 bottom end. It was old bottom end. I know it's got roughly, I'm guessing roughly probably 10,000 miles on it. And no, I'm not joking. It's not a lie. It's not a joke. And this top end had a lot of mileage on it as well. And when I mean a lot of mileage, I mean a lot of mileage. I don't know if this is it or not. It's one of these. Yep, that's it. This is the one. When I say a lot of mileage, I mean a lot of mileage. I bet this jug here's probably got roughly probably 6,000 miles on it. I'm going to come off this crankcase in this block with that rod. So you guys out here getting just, 1,000 miles out of these engines, then you've done either something wrong or you just got a bad engine. That's all there's to it. Because this engine was used when I got it. It didn't run at all when I got it. You could fire it up, but it took you 5 blocks to fire it up. Once you got it fired up, it didn't want to run. Even not under load with the clutch pulled in, It did not want to run at all. You can sit there with the clutch pulled in, have full throttle, and it was big. No, now it's different. It's not like that. It is not like that. So, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pull this engine back apart and take the exhaust off of the intake and pull this top end back off. And we're going to change this rings in this. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change the rings in it. Another thing is I've noticed is when I've done that, I've got leaks, which I have to cure. I've got leaks. I know this. Once I get them leaks cured and I change the rings out, we're gonna do another test run today and see what we get. Because the thing is, it smokes like a freight train no matter what you do. So let me set this camera up and let me start this app on this phone for this camera, and then we'll get to tearing this engine back apart, making sure everything's nice and neat and tidy and put back together properly. Be right back. motherfuckers better stop fucking around. Okay. Now, I want to show you guys something. I'm going to show you something in between different heads of different manufacturers from factory. Yes, from China. Now, I did not do this. Okay. See this? See how it's got the squish band in it? This one here does not. See the difference? Side-by-side comparison. Another thing is, homemade base gasket of aluminum. I know everybody's going to be wondering why I made one and why I'm using it. Because the port timing is off. Just by the slightest little bit. You add a homemade base gasket to the right proper thickness. Put your proper port timing right in place. But one thing that you have to do if you're going to do something like this, which I know I didn't do, but I'm going to do this time on video, is we have to use a pair of factory base gaskets, one on top and one on bottom. That's why this leaked. Okay. Now, let's get a rag and clean all this shit up. Because when I done all this yesterday, when I changed the jug out, and I added this base gasket that I made, I changed the plug, I changed the air filter, they made a big improvement in performance. But with all the leaks and the bad rings, that's a problem. I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, why are you using that same head gasket? It's already smushed. Now you guys all seen the oil that was all over that head. Look at how clean it got just by me wiping it off. Let's pull this piston and then we're going to replace the rings. But the reason I'm pulling the pistons, I want to look at the wrist pin and the bearing. This pin's showing a little bit of wear. Not that bad. This pin bearing is good. There's no mar on the crank rod, so we're good there as well. When you're taking these things apart and putting them back together, make sure that you do not lose any of these parts. Now this piston and these rings, believe it or not, is out of that old PK80. I know you're probably wondering why I would use such a piston and rings. I've heard a lot of guys have major failures, so I wanted to see how far I could run it. Let's see if I can reproduce something failing like everybody else has had. I've never had that happen. You're looking at the piston and rings that come out of that old PK80. No joke. Look. And you see the blow-by on the piston from the bad rings. You can see it. So this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. Since these rings have seen better days, remove top ring. Remove your bottom ring. Simple as that. Okay. Now, we've got this piston here that come out of that motor. And come out of a, basically a Super Peak 80, whatever you want to call it. Motor ran for like a week last year, and that was it. The reason I'm not using this piston, I'm going to reuse this old piston, is because, believe it or not, this is the lightest piston I have for the Peak 80s. This piston here is way heavier than this piston is, by like 4 grams. It's quite a bit in rotating mass. And if you're wondering how I know all this, here's a tool to have. This is a good tool to have. Now, that way you can rotate. You can measure the piston, the rings, the whole 9 yards in weight. We know this piston and this wrist pivot bearing matches this crank really good, just like it did with the other PK80 crank. Once I put new rings on it and I put this puppy back together, we should be good. But now, look at the difference between rings. Look at how wore out them poor rings are. See, they was showing major wear. Major wear. So, take your old rings, take them off your piston. Take your new rings off this other piston. And yes, this is hard to do without breaking these cast rings, because they're cast iron rings. They're very fragile. So if you're going to do this, and you got an old piston laying around with good rings, do yourself a favor. Make sure you take your time removing the rings from the other piston. And when you're putting them back, do the same thing. Make sure you take your time and you do it properly. Another thing you want to do is you want to look for the wear on the rings. This ring here that just come off this other piston Has a little bit more wear than this ring here. I know somebody's gonna say this is no, but this is what we're gonna do this time. 2 rings come off of it. We're only putting 1 back on it. Now we might not use this thick head gasket. I might use a thinner one. But I can tell you one thing. We're staying with this same head. If you're wondering what I was just doing there, I was making sure that when I tighten this head down and all this jug and stuff, that when this engine goes to rotate over, this piston's not going to smack this head. If it's got so much as a little tink, it's got to be pulled back apart and you got to fix it. Because you will ruin this engine. Wide open exhaust. Awesome. So we have a wide open intake on top dead center. We have a wide open exhaust on bottom dead center. That's why the piston skirt's notched. Another thing is, when you're doing this, if you're wanting to mod this engine, and another thing I'm going to tell you people laugh about all the time, is that they say that these engines in stock form can't run over 30 miles an hour. That's a lie. That is a lie. Stock pipe, stock NT style carburetor, and stock setup, no reed valve, will do 50 miles an hour. Top dollar. The trick is to notch the piston skirt for top dead center and wide open port. Because not, your intake is going to be off. You're not going to get your full flow of intake. Your bottom dead center of the exhaust has to be proper. If it's not, you've got another problem. Another thing is when these engines come out, and everybody claims that these pipes are junk. To a point, yes they are, but I'll tell you what, for stock, they keep the noise down, keep the police off of you. And if you're wondering how to make it open, like, watch. I'll prove a point. That's wide open exhaust. How did I do that? Take this cap off. There'll be a tube like this. Cut it as close to this end cap as you can get it. Put your cap back on. That's how you do that. Now, she won't leak now. That I guarantee. There's another thing that would really mess you up, and I'll tell you what now. If you don't know and you're new to the bike game, any what I would call a vacuum leak, any leaks around the intake, around the exhaust, around the head, the base of the jug, and between the crankcase halves, any leaks, and you're going to end up in a problem, including where the intake mates to the carburetor. Two-stroke does not like any vacuum leaks. And the engine has to be airtight. It will burn up. You will burn an engine up real fast like. I've seen it done and I've seen it happen. I've not done it myself, but I've seen other guys burn engines up due to leaks. Stay. Don't roll away, motherfucker. Stay. That bolt just stripped out on me. See, it's another thing I was talking about with leaks. Well, you always check into this stuff. See, threads gone, stripped out. Bad thing about Chinese bolts, nothing personal, China, but your fucking steel sure does suck. Okay, that should work. That should work. Okay. Okay. Well, that's done. Now it's time to take this puppy out here and go for a test spin around the block and see what I got. And I get an improvement in what I was looking for, or did I make it worse? We'll see.